Please welcome Accenture Managing Director, Global Open Source Lead, Sven Loberg.
Good afternoon. Hi, so my name is Sven Loberg, part of Accenture's emerging technology practice, and I lead up open source within Accenture. Today I'm certainly excited to recognize our long-term relationship with Red Hat. Dates back over 14 years. This is now the 6th year in a row that we've sponsored Summit, so this is just a great moment. A little bit about what we do within emerging technology. So what the group does, essentially, we look at technologies with a 3-year perspective of what we might want to incubate as far as next-generation application architectures, for example, that we see our clients looking to implement, and where we can get ahead of that as far as define thought leadership, reference implementations, the first client implementations, and ultimately scale those capabilities. So when they are then ready to be implementing at scale, we're there to deliver for our clients. So a little bit of what I'll start with is three things that I'll talk about today. One of those is around certainly open source and the innovation that we see there. The second item, I'll talk a little bit about a few examples of where Accenture has partnered with Red Hat and others to combine our industry expertise as well as open source expertise to create a variety of industry offerings to provide to our clients. And the third area, I'll talk and share my perspective on community engagement and contribution and the importance of that as we take our journey, Accenture and the rest of the ecosystem, and why that's important. But first, let me step back and talk a little bit about open source within Accenture. So obviously, we're very large, 373,000 people within Accenture, right? 60,000, as far as 40,000 of those being around Java, another 6,000 specifically around open source technologies. This year, we were recognized as the Innovation Partner of the Year by Red Hat, and certainly we're involved with a number of foundations and communities, so certainly like OpenStack and OpenShift Commons, but also things like Hyperledger as well that have an industry aspect to them, as well as some of the communities. So things like Spring, Mahout, LifeRay, D3, a variety of those are just a few of them. And also now we're starting to do a lot of contribution as well to new projects. So for example, our Open DevOps platform that if you go out to our GitHub page that you'll see, and I'll talk a little bit about later today. And really we're continuing to see this grow. And this will be a little bit also the journey that I'll share with you today as far as the experience and the journey that Accenture has taken around open source. So let's look at technology and the different waves that have occurred. So certainly there's been a lot of rapid innovation going on. So certainly if you look, you'll see what's going on with the pace and the amount of adoption of these new technologies that are coming out. You'll see, as far as on the left here, mainframe. And you see the mainframe era, right, kind of rise and then kind of subtly kind of decline as the mainframe era has started to kind of ebb. But then also something interesting happens here when you start getting to the 1990s, right? You see this acceleration. You see Web 2.0. You see big data. You see things like IoT and smart machines, as well as artificial intelligence start to come around. And that's very interesting because a lot of that is based on open source technologies. In fact, it was led, right, versus maybe some of the other technology trends in the past. And that really then reflects really what we're seeing around open source and how open source is being used, which is in the past, it was all about using open source as a substitute, a commodity play, as far as to replace maybe a proprietary platform. And now we're seeing it really drive innovation. Which is really kind of the trend that I think is the most interesting as we're now in this cloud era with PaaS and SaaS really dominating what we're seeing implemented. So taking that as far as what we're seeing around open source and open source innovation. So there's just a few different trends here that are going on. There's certainly more, but one of those is certainly what we're seeing around the internet scale companies, right? The Netflixes, the Googles, the Yahoos, the Facebooks, right? As they develop these different projects or frameworks internally, right? They're seeing, hey, there's value outside. Let's contribute these, right? And then others, like Accenture, like other enterprises, can take advantage of and continue to drive innovation and take advantage of some of the things that they found maybe had limitations and looked for an alternative or built alternatives to some of the proprietary products, as well as looking at the emergence of non-relational persistence models. So certainly the proliferation, as we've seen before, with the relational databases, for example, we maybe had 2, maybe 3 options out there. Right now it's all about what type of data do I have? How am I going to access that data? That's now driving the decision. What's the requirements that really are going to dictate what I need, right? And that may be, hey, I have a need for a key value pair database like Couchbase or like Redis, or I have a columnar database like Cassandra, or certainly other big data as far as the Clouderas and the Hortonworks, using the right data store for the job. But the other area is certainly around what we've seen the evolution on the client UI space. So certainly the evolving of what we're expecting as users, right, based on some of the consumer experiences that we have. So certainly the Angulars, the Backbone Marionettes, the React JSs, right, are now how we build single-page applications today to kind of have that rich, responsive experience that we all expect. As well as the fourth area, which is around kind of everything as a service, right, whether it be our cloud providers, whether it be things like platform with OpenShift or containerization, all the way to the application, the expectation that it should be provided as a service and be automated as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things as we kind of started to leverage open source. As I said, we have done that for a while, but really as it's really taken even more momentum as we look at some of the industry assets that we've built. So the first one I'm going to talk about a little about is the Accenture Video Services. So Accenture Video Services is essentially a way of managing, delivering, and monetizing video streaming in a seamless user experience. So what that allows us to do is whether it be kind of IPTV, set-top boxes, or unmanaged boxes, whether it be a tablet or a PC or something else, allows us to offer that as far as an implement with clients, a lot of that being in the telecommunications space, content and cable providers as well. A good example of that is, first, any cricket enthusiasts in the audience? All right. So certainly, one of these was what we did with Hotstar in India. So as part of the implementation around AVS, we implemented, as far as the first time they reused it at scale, was the India-Pakistan national match. Over 25 million views, which is incredible as far as a first implementation is what they did. And now we've really just seen it. And what's interesting about AVS, it's all built with open source technology, certainly a lot of Red Hat technologies, both the community as well as the enterprise versions. Clients have the option of, I'd like to use the community version, or hey, I'd like to also have the enterprise support that Red Hat and others provide. And it has the flexibility to do that, right? Whether it be Fuse or BRMS or Rail or some of the other infrastructure components. That's what part of AVS. The second one I'll talk a little bit about is what we're seeing around IoT and what we've built around our connected platform as a service. So what this is an open reference architecture and an IoT platform that is managed. You can use it as a pay-by-the-drink option. Also, there's an on-prem version of it as well, but it also then ties in the various use cases that we have from various industries. So whether it be health or whether it be around commerce or operations or vehicle, right, allows clients to quickly prototype a particular use case they might have, maybe add to that, but quickly get that into production and have it either, again, as a hosted option or have it on-prem if that's their preference. Again, using a lot of Red Hat technologies as well as other partners. Example, as far as something we just announced with Azure this week, as far as around our connected platform. And so one example of this is what we've used at Hyundai. So Hyundai, as far as for some of their vessels, around their containerization vessels, as far as from port to drive efficiency, so different sensors then that were on the vessel. So as they then steamed into a port, they could kind of see, well, how quickly am I getting there? Am I going to get there too soon and have to wait in the harbor? Maybe I should slow down and save fuel. Right? All that happens with real-time analytics on top of it. They're then, it goes back to the central station. They can then make a decision and then communicate real-time as far as to make an adjustment as needed. The third is around intelligent orchestration. And so intelligent orchestration, we've heard a lot about this, but this is really kind of now taking the whole journey from infrastructure to application and pulling together a number of the Red Hat technology products. So certainly things like OpenStack and Ansible and Cloud Farms and OpenShift, also other things like Brocade as well as VM Turbo to basically provide rapid infrastructure. So they can be quickly spun up, spun down, but also it can be optimized. So an example of this was what we're seeing really certainly in telecommunications as well as financial services. And what we've done there, for example, in financial services, we've also then bundled in the various compliance and regulatory aspects of it as well, right? So then it has some of the industry needs as part of that solution. So a lot of these, as I mentioned, all of these have open source in them, right? And this was kind of part of the journey that we've taken within Accenture to use more and more. So certainly there, in some cases, were proprietary options out there. We said, well, whether it was because it was a SaaS option or just in general, we had some innovation or other feature, right, that we wanted to add. Having it be built with open source gave the team a lot of flexibility. But there was a journey that it took to kind of get this kind of shift to occur within Accenture. So this is really kind of getting at now some of the key enablers that we've taken, right, to sort of incorporate open source, right, within Accenture, right, from doing internal development, whether it be for some of our products, also certainly some of our, a lot of our client developments as well. We've always done a lot of custom development, right, but it's slowly evolved over time. So a couple of these, right, that we kind of started with, how do we kind of bake in the idea of being community-driven? How do we get this mindset? So one of the things that we did is we implemented InnerSource. So we gave them a DevOps platform as far as the employees, the professionals within Accenture, and so okay, here's how to do CI/CD. Here's kind of how you develop with an agile delivery approach. This is about 7 or 8 years ago now that we implemented that, right? And that helped us to instill the culture that really is pretty critical, right? The tools and all that and technology are important, but to get the culture of what it meant to be community-driven kind of incorporated into Accenture. Now we have over 3,000 active projects running on our InnerSource platform. Right. The other aspect that we did is we updated our open source policy. So certainly, one of the key things was how can we make it easier for folks within Accenture to contribute to open source projects. We knew a number of people certainly were already doing it, but how do we get better visibility to that to make it easier, as well as some of the, whether it be internal projects or if it makes sense, some of the client implementations as well, that they want to contribute these to open source communities. How do we make that easier? So part of our contribution process, we streamlined it and made it very easy, right, for projects. Still had the legal kind of reviews and make sure that we weren't giving away any kind of IP, whether it be client or things that we thought maybe aren't necessary for the open source arena, but a lot of it, we found a lot of it could. We also then did a lot of training as well. We rolled out, just imagine 40,000 Java developers, right? There's a learning curve there, right? As they started to use the communities, how do we incorporate that into kind of their day-to-day interactions, right? Particularly some that maybe were more used to working with a product company and demanding things, right? Versus, I'm a community member, I'm participating, and how does that dynamic, what's the etiquette of that? The other aspect is around GitHub. So we opened our, some of our community projects that we were already doing, but opened up an open source site as far as for our contributions as well as our blog. Right? What this made it easier for us to get visibility. We already knew that there's contributions being made, but how can we make that more visible internally? We saw, for example, InnerSource, we'd see something get developed internally, but then when we put it on the public repos, the amount of internal contributions exploded, right? As people were more interested in being involved in that. Did a little gamification as well to reward people, and we had the visibility to do that now that we had better transparency into the types of things that they were contributing, as well as then do some of our investments as well and how we wanted to then position that. The fourth thing we did is around some of our open source governance, right? So we had open source governance as far as part of our policy. We want to take it a step further. So this is something that we've done really to implement, in this case, Black Duck, an open source management tool, to allow, certainly from a legal perspective, us to get better insight into types of open source components we were using, whether it be on our internal projects or our Accenture software, as well as on our client engagements as well. So what we now let them do as far as and recommend them, and we'll as part of the legal review process that big projects go through or software go through, right, is we then scan baseline that code, right? And that's, for example, for our products group, very usable, right, very useful, right, and very valuable for them to be able to take and know exactly what's in their products as they use more and more open source, right? And as, of course, they have versions of that particular set of products, and they have even more client implementations of it, right? And so they know, for example, when an open source component, right, like OpenSSL comes out and there's a vulnerability, right? They know exactly what products, what versions, what client implementations that open source component's in. They can proactively engage their engineers and say, okay, we need to correct this and these X, Y, and Z different products, and then we can proactively go to the client and notify them, hey, this is going to be fixed in 4 days, versus them reading it in the newspaper. Obviously, much less desirable experience than we want. Same thing, right? On all the large custom development projects that we do, we now allow and really encourage to have the projects be reviewed as far as be scanned, right? So this is something that we now offer to all our custom development projects, right? That they can then have it be scanned by our Black Duck implementation, whether we're doing kind of application development or maintenance on that. Certainly additional value, and allows us to then, from a risk perspective as well, kind of work out some of those concerns, which are often kind of it's not so much the technology, it's really kind of when clients have concerns around open source, it's more about, hey, I've got concerns around IP and risk and security. This is a way for us to mitigate that, as well as then encourage more use of open source. Yeah, so on this journey, so certainly what we see is the awareness and participation, right? This is where a lot of enterprises were, as far as still are, Accenture kind of working through and kind of evolving as well, right? But where we all want to get to, right, is this portion, right, as individuals as well as enterprises, to be involved in the communities, making greater contributions and making greater as far as engagement within them, right? And often, whether I'm talking with clients or whether I'm talking with our internal folks, it is a question, well, I want to contribute, I want to be engaged, is code the only thing? And certainly it's not, right? There's a lot of different things you could do around blogs, around communities, conferences, writing up editorials, identifying new features or bugs, contributing bug fixes, a whole list of things that you can do, right? Then it's more than just code. Right? And so why is it important? Why are we trying to encourage, as far as in getting people to contribute more to open source? So certainly as we do more open source development, right, and work with clients, this is important, right, as far as the contributing to communities, right, because it's important to keep them healthy and innovative, right? What this means basically is it really also then goes to kind of the Accenture DNA around some of our core values. When you think about a community project, right, very much it's very global, right, in nature. And that's kind of what that diversity is, what makes it then even more valuable, as you have these different viewpoints, these different features and kind of points of view kind of all contributing to a project, which then creates more value. And also the aspect of stewardship, right? The idea that you need to be giving back to the community, continuing to drive that innovation, right? Keeping the community healthy, certainly as Accenture as well as then other enterprises are using open source, right? This is important, right? We're now dependent on these communities to be around, right, and to be maintained and continue to innovate. And so this is why it's important, right, to have that stewardship, and why we feel that we also need to be contributing as well. Certainly large users of open source, contributing for a while, but taking it to the next level now. Right, which this kind of idea as far as of contributing, and certainly the idea of being more involved. One aspect I mentioned earlier was around kind of the concerns around security, right? Certainly on open source. But one thing, obviously, this isn't just isolated to open source, but around cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is something that certainly we've put a big emphasis around. So we just opened last week. We announced that we opened a new cybersecurity lab in Israel, in Tel Aviv, right? Really to focus on cybersecurity R&D. Right? And the reason we did that, right, because we wanted to drive innovation around cybersecurity. We wanted to be able to have advanced detection intelligence. We wanted to be able to develop innovations around early detection, as well as looking at how could we do that and drive innovation as far as through things like blockchain, artificial intelligence, as well as advanced analytics, right? And why was that important for us? Well, certainly as a top priority, our clients need to be resilient against threats and attacks that may be facing them and be able to do that in a faster way, right? And that's why we made this investment around our cybersecurity in Israel. But it's not the only investment that we've made. So certainly one aspect that we're doing, which is more going back to that community aspect and the importance of it, is, okay, certainly the cybersecurity and the investments we're making there, higher profile, but also importantly is taking care of the things underneath. So one of the things that we're announcing today, right, is our involvement in the core infrastructure initiative. So this is things like OpenSSL, the network time protocol, underlying projects as far as open source projects that really underpin the global infrastructure around spreading and disseminating information, right? And why is this important, right? We feel as Accenture that we need to be doing more, right? Certainly there's organizations, so Cisco that was up earlier, right, already involved. There's about 20 plus different organizations that are contributing to the CII project. It's part of the Linux Foundation. We felt, right, as Accenture, certainly as kind of one of the system integrators, and kind of now the first independent system integrators, that we also need to be part of the CII project, to be contributing to that, because it's important, right? It's important to be certainly driving the innovation, but also giving, right, and contributing to that as part of our good citizenship. All right, which is also why we're now increasing. We are already part of the Linux Foundation as silver members around some of the work we do with Hyperledger and the OpenO, the orchestration project around NFV, as well as software-defined infrastructure. But we're also increasing our membership in the Linux Foundation, which is also another first. Certainly, there's lots of members of the Linux Foundation, over 180. But like I said, this in the case is the first one that we're now the first system integrator, right, to be at that gold level. And we don't expect to be the only ones. We hope to be seeing quite a few more right now join as Accenture kind of positions themselves as this is something that the broader ecosystem needs to be looking at and investing in as well. So with that, certainly, hopefully you found those things interesting around some of our industry assets. Certainly stop by our booth 201 at the Pavilion, our GitHub page, as well as our open source blog. Take a look at it. Certainly looking forward to seeing some of your feedback. And with three things here, just want to close with. Certainly, three things: innovation, as far as open source driving innovation; the power of partnership, as far as in the ecosystem; and then also, the importance of community engagement and contribution, right? And that really what makes the power of open source come to life. So with that, thank you, and certainly looking forward to talking with you this week, as well as in the marketplace. Thanks.